Hello and welcome. Today the topic is multiple sclerosis and Lyme disease the same thing? If we haven't met, my name is Pam Bartha and I'm the author of Become a Wellness Champion and the founder of Live Disease Free. I'm going to be presenting a very compelling case that really suggests that Lyme disease is a very big cause of multiple sclerosis. So I first want to share something with you that is very strange. On the MS Society website, they used to have a page dedicated to explaining that multiple sclerosis and Lyme disease were different. So a lot of people are confused about this. And so they made a page that would really explain. And they said on that page, they said that number one, yes, multiple sclerosis, and this is the MS Society. This was a page that they had. MS and Lyme disease, they have many of the same symptoms. They also have the same results on MRIs and lumbar punctures, but they're different. Even though they look the same as far as symptoms and test results, they're different because if you're diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, antibiotics don't help. But if you have Lyme disease and you treat early, if you're catching the Lyme disease early, then antibiotics help. Well, that page disappeared off their website. I'm not sure. Maybe they moved it somewhere else. Maybe they revamped their website. I'm not sure. But for some reason, that information is not there anymore. And a lot of people are confused because, like some people that have MS, they get tested for Lyme disease. And it shows that they do have some of the antibody bands. They work with integrative doctors that are picking up Lyme disease. There's many different integrative practitioners that have linked MS and Lyme disease. There's over 100 years of research. We're going to talk a little bit about that. There's so much evidence that multiple sclerosis is probably caused by not just Lyme disease. And before we go any further, I want you to, if you don't follow my work, MS is an infectious disease, and there are multiple parasites that are causing MS. It's not just one microbe that's causing the disease, but there are a few that are in the forefront. They're commonly found in MS, and they are some of the big culprits, I would say, that are causing MS. And we explain this like if you have a garden and you want to take care of your garden, you want to manage the weeds, you don't just have dandelions or thistles, you've got many different types of weeds. So today we're going to be talking about one of those pests, one of those weeds that are really common in multiple sclerosis, and that would be the spirochete bacteria that causes Lyme disease. So spirochete, you're going to hear me talking about that. Spirochete is like a corkscrew-shaped bacteria. And Borrelia is that bacteria that looks like a corkscrew. It has that shape. And that is the microbe that causes Lyme disease. And there's this huge, huge link. So it is definitely one of the infections that are heavily causing multiple sclerosis in a lot of people. Maybe not everyone, but in a lot of people. So again, if you're just joining, on the MS Society website, and I captured the quotes because they disappeared, but they were talking about, like, they're trying to get people to understand, like, no, MS and Lyme disease are different. Because if you have Lyme disease and MS, they both have this very, very similar, many of the same symptoms. They also show up as the same test results as far as lesions and lumbar puncture results as far as the antibody bands, but they're different because when you have MS and you take antibiotics, this is what they said on their website. If you have MS and you take antibiotics, it doesn't really help. But in the early stages of Lyme disease, then it can help treat the infection of Lyme. So they're saying that's the only difference, really. That's the biggest difference. But there's a big problem because they actually funded a study. They funded several studies, but this one in particular is that it's a 2017 study. And they showed that, so this was a multiple sclerosis they funded a clinical trial. So this is not just a small pilot study, it's a rigorous gold standard study. And they had 142 patients in it with early MS. So this is the clinically isolated syndrome where people have a MS diagnosis and they've had their first attack. Also 12 MS clinics across Canada, double-blind placebo-controlled study. So that really shows that it's a well-done study. It's something that you're not going to just dismiss. It was published in the New England Journal of Medicine. That's one of the world's most prestigious scientific journals or medical journals. And the researchers gave half of the patients antibiotics called minocycline, and the other half was a placebo. They followed them up for 6 months, monitoring them up to 2 years, and they found that patients who received the antibiotic were significantly less likely to develop clinically definite multiple sclerosis compared to those who got the placebo. So this is really big because, well, number one, we know that if we get bitten by a tick or mosquito, we're infected with Lyme. Antibiotics can help us in the acute stage of this infection. When we've been bitten, if we have chronic Lyme, we know that antibiotics don't work. So this study that was funded by the MS Society, they said that this antibiotic, if a person had just one MS flare and they were diagnosed with MS and they took the antibiotics at that point, that it actually, like, significantly less of them went on to develop multiple sclerosis in the future. That's really significant, right? So in one breath on their website, they're like, no, antibiotics don't help MS. But then in the other side, they published a study that said that antibiotics can be helpful, especially in the early stages of multiple sclerosis. Again, I'm not saying that we should all run out and go on minocycline. If you have chronic Lyme infections, it doesn't work either. The antibiotics don't work well at that point, right? It's very difficult to treat chronic infections. So this study was funded by the MS Society and again published in the New England Journal of Medicine. So that's a really significant study. Totally contradicts what they said. So then again on their website, they said that MS and Lyme disease look identical as far as symptoms and as far as test results. The only difference is that for Lyme disease, antibiotics work, and for multiple sclerosis, antibiotics don't work. And then they shared that study that antibiotics did help MS. So do antibiotics help multiple sclerosis or not? I believe that they do, maybe in early stages if you have a Borrelia infection. But again, there are multiple parasites that can cause these MS symptoms. But these Lyme infections are really common in multiple sclerosis. They're very common. We're going to talk about more of the evidence about that. So this research was buried. They're not talking about it. This is really important research that we should be talking about and we should be discussing it. I will be creating a blog post. I always do every week. Go to livediseasefree.com. It's a library. It's a gold mine. It's helping you to understand why you're sick with the different types of infections that are commonly found in multiple sclerosis and how we treat them, how we recover, the diet that's really helpful to help us to get ready to treat. And I have talked about this study in 2017 and how this really contradicts what they have on their website. So I did that talk a long time ago, but I'm bringing this back because it's just unbelievable that nobody is talking about this. It's crazy. So in fact, researchers have been documenting these spirochetes in multiple sclerosis patients over 100 years now. If we go back to 1911, researchers first linked these spirochete bacteria, so this corkscrew-shaped bacteria that we call Lyme or Borrelia, and it's the bacteria that causes Lyme disease, that was already discovered in multiple sclerosis in 1911. then through the 1920s and 30s, 40s, and 50s, study after study found these spirochetes in the brains and the spinal fluid of MS patients. So these are not fringe studies. These are peer-reviewed studies, and some of them found in journals like The Lancet, which is a very prestigious medical scientific journal. In 1957, this is really huge, almost 70 years ago, a researcher cultured spirochete bacteria in the spinal fluid of MS patients. And so her results, she found that at least 78% of the MS patients grew spirochetes, and 0% of healthy people had these spirochete bacteria. Incredible. And that was in the spinal fluid of MS patients. Almost 80%. And it's hard to grow this spirochete. I'm sure I've read that she had to, you have to try different ways to grow them. They're not easy to grow, but she was able to grow them, and she found them in almost 80% of MS patients and in 0% of healthy patients. That's in 1957. Her work was highlighted in Time magazine, which again is a prestigious magazine. It's not a fringe magazine. So why has all of this stuff, all of this research been buried? Why, after spirochetes have been discovered in multiple sclerosis for nearly 50 years, did this research just stop and it was dropped? This finding of in 80% of that should have been, somebody should have done other studies and proven her wrong or proven her right. And then later, Dr. Alan MacDonald, he actually found these spirochete bacteria. He's a researcher, a pathologist that really has researched a lot about Borrelia and this bacteria. And he found Borrelia in the myelin sheath of Alzheimer's patients. So that's really interesting. Inside, and I've shared that on my masterclass training, you can actually see pictures of that. So he found this Borrelia bacteria in the myelin of Alzheimer's patients. So we know that Borrelia can infect the myelin sheath of nerve cells. He's shown that in pictures. It's proof, it's evidence. But he also found in MS patients, he found these little worms, and I've talked about that, these filarial worms. And in every MS subject he looked at, he found many of these small worms. Again, this is why I'm saying it's not just Borrelia. But these little worms were full, infested, loaded with this spirochete bacteria. So he was talking about how these worms, they're like a Trojan horse. They're bringing Borrelia into our central nervous system. Sure, we can get Borrelia into the central nervous system other ways, but this is definitely one way because the worms carry Borrelia, this bacteria, into the central nervous system, and they're found in the central nervous system of MS patients. Borrelia is found in MS because of those worms, and maybe other reasons too. So we know that Borrelia is in the central nervous system of MS. We know that Borrelia can and possibly enjoys infecting the myelin. So is it possible that what we've been told, that MS is just our immune system is attacking our tissue, our nerve tissue for no reason? Could it be that our immune system is actually just defending us from infections in the central nervous system? That's its primary job. That is common sense. That is what it does. It actually protects us and defends us from different types of infections in the central nervous system or throughout the body. Why do we just run to the theory that, our immune system has gone haywire, it's just attacking our tissue for no reason? It doesn't even make sense. So, spirochetes are found in the central nervous system of MS, thanks to the work of Dr. Alan MacDonald, and we know that spirochetes can infect the myelin. Maybe it's great nutrition there for it. Maybe it likes, different parasites like to live in different parts, but it's been shown on images that it infects the myelin sheath. So there you go. Like, it's just, you just can't make this stuff up. It's absolutely crazy. So what does this mean? So again, for decades, we've been told that it's autoimmune, and it's not autoimmune. It's a chronic infection in our central nervous system. It's one of the chronic infections. We talked about the little worms. I won't talk about it here, but he also found tapeworm larvae and developing tapeworms in the central nervous system of MS patients. So we're talking about different types of worms. We're talking about this bacteria that causes Lyme disease. And that could be why that Borrelia is such a big part of multiple sclerosis. So this is what's causing the damage. It is not the immune system. We know that it's going to cause inflammation directly and indirectly. So his findings were so huge. He really deserves an award for that. And just wanted to go on a little farther here. So clinical evidence. So there is other clinical evidence. So we've talked about the studies from 1911, the 20s, 30s, 40s, and then 1957, where they found Borrelia spirochetes. That one bacteriologist found it in almost 80% of the spinal fluid of MS patients. But then there's Dr. Dietrich Klinghardt, and he's one of my mentors. He's an amazing doctor. He's been treating Lyme patients for many, many years. He's an elderly doctor. He has so much wisdom and understanding and knowledge from serving thousands of people all over the world. He's also trains doctors. I believe he's 80 years old or older, and he's still training doctors. He still has a practice. So Dr. Klinghardt is a physician, and he specializes in Lyme disease. And there's an old documentary, I'm sure you can find it online. It's called Under Our Skin. You can watch it for free. It's really fascinating. He made a statement that really should have shocked the medical world. He said, "We have never in the past 5 years found a single MS patient who did not test positive for Borrelia burgdorferi, not a single one." So when that video was made, he said, in the last 5 years of working with MS patients, we have not found a single MS patient that did not test positive for Borrelia burgdorferi, which is that spirochete bacteria that causes Lyme disease. Then, so he reported that over 90% of patients who come to his clinic test positive for Borrelia. So he reported that over 90% of his patients test positive for Borrelia. That's huge. And then there's Dr. Richard Horowitz. He's treated thousands and thousands of Lyme patients. And back when he wrote the book, I think it was at least 12,000 Lyme patients he's treated. He's a very well-respected, again, physician. And he said that Lyme disease is the great mimicker or imitator. And because it mimics many diseases, especially multiple sclerosis. And there's a lot of commonalities with Lyme disease and MS, he said. The neuropathy, a lot of cognitive dysfunction, a lot of muscular, skeletal pain and fatigue. And he said he's also had a lot of success in treating people for Lyme and also MS with antibiotics. I believe he uses like combinations of antibiotics. So he is another doctor, and he has written several books on Lyme disease, and he talks about MS. And that's Dr. Horowitz, Horowitz. And Dr. Klinghardt is Klinghardt. He is an amazing doctor. Both of them are. So these are doctors that have been in their clinical practice treating Lyme disease, but also treating Lyme disease and multiple sclerosis and having incredible improvements, like just mind-blowing. And so like, why are we not looking in this area? So just to summarize again, we have all this historical evidence from 1911 to 1957, many peer-reviewed studies finding these spirochetes in the spinal fluid and central nervous system of MS patients. Then in 1957, that bacteriologist was able to grow spirochetes from the spinal fluid of at least 80% of patients, knowing that it's hard to grow these spirochetes. And then, so she published that in Time, or it was reported in Time magazine. And then more modern evidence, Borrelia found inside the brain of Alzheimer's patients, infecting the myelin sheath. So we know that it does infect the myelin sheath. And then Borrelia found, so he found worms in 100%. Dr. Alan McDonald found worms in 100% of the MS subject he looked at. And in those worms, 100% of them were loaded with Borrelia. So again, significant clinical findings. And then Dr. Horowitz, I shared also his findings. So we have a huge amount of evidence that Borrelia is probably one of the common parasites that cause multiple sclerosis. And a parasite is any microbe that lives in your body and causes you harm. So it can be bacteria. It can also be protozoa, fungi, and worms. So, and remember, I shared that there are different worms involved. I've done many different talks on the different types of infections that have been linked to MS. Probably if you want to get a summary, my masterclass training will really summarize a lot of that for you. But again, remember that the MS Society, they kind of pulled this. Maybe they reorganized it. Maybe I just can't find it anymore. But that page where they had all of the, like trying to build a case like, oh, no, MS and Lyme disease are different. They're not the same. But then the reason they gave for it being different is it's contradictory to the very research that they've done. There's another big piece to this. So syphilis is a disease caused by a bacteria, another spirochetal bacteria like Borrelia that causes Lyme disease. And there are different stages with syphilis. So we can have it in like our blood, in our body, but in the neurosyphilis, it moves into the central nervous system. So that is a spirochetal bacteria that moves into the central nervous system. And it's the same, it's almost like a cousin to Borrelia. And scientists know that when that spirochete bacteria moves into the central nervous system of syphilis patients where they have neurosyphilis, they have symptoms identical to multiple sclerosis also, which is, I'm just going to go down to it. So they can have severe headaches, they can have muscle weakness and spasticity, cognitive problems, confusion, dementia, vision problems, blindness, tremors, coordination problems, paralysis. And that's by a different bacteria that's related to Borrelia that causes Lyme disease. And it also gets into the central nervous system. So if they know this, why would they not, like if you know that a certain bacteria can cause these neurological symptoms that are very similar, identical to multiple sclerosis, why wouldn't they look at the spinal fluid for Borrelia? Why wouldn't they study that? I mean, they do spinal taps. Why do they only look for the antibodies? They're only looking for the evidence of the immune system is fighting something. But we don't want to figure out what it's fighting. Oh, it's just your nerve tissue. Don't worry, it's just your nerve tissue. It's just gone haywire for no reason. It's so frustrating. So again, these are exactly, so neurosyphilis and MS, exactly the same symptoms where that bacteria gets in the central nervous system. It's also a corkscrew-shaped bacteria related, similar to Borrelia. So we have so much evidence that Borrelia, or a bacteria that is corkscrew-shaped, that is very similar to Borrelia, or maybe it's a cousin, there's different species, that it is one of the main infections in multiple sclerosis. It is huge, like the evidence. We've got 100 years of studies. We've got clinicians that are treating. We've got even studies showing taking antibiotics early in multiple sclerosis, just like you have to treat Lyme disease early with antibiotics, right? If you don't treat Lyme disease early with antibiotics, it's really hard. Like chronic Lyme, it doesn't work very well with antibiotics. Same thing with MS. It doesn't work very well with antibiotics. So it's just kind of logical that one of the infections that causes MS is a spirochete like Borrelia. So we know that spirochetes cause demyelination. Oh, I forgot to mention that too. So we know that syphilis causes demyelination in the central nervous system. And MS causes demyelination also. We also know that Borrelia is present in MS patients in their central nervous system. We know that antibiotics can help prevent the development of MS early on in the early stages. So if you have MS, you've had it for many years, it's not going to help because of number one, it's not going to, I don't believe that it penetrates to your brain very well either, the minocycline. And we also know that Lyme and MS look identical according to the MS Society. So is multiple sclerosis caused by Lyme disease? I don't know. All I can say is that when I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, that was 28 years ago, I decided to take a different path because when I went to see the neurologist, I was told there was no hope for a cure. I would be completely disabled in time. I was devastated. I thought, how can you go from being a healthy person to having this mysterious thing taking over your body where you are going to be completely disabled in time? So I cried out to God. I begged for help. Very shortly after, my mother-in-law gave me a book on integrative health talking about a type of infection that could be causing MS. And that was talking about Candida. And I've talked about Candida in the past too. That's another infection. I decided to take a different path at that time. I decided not to follow standard of care because it gave me no hope for a cure. I would be completely disabled. I would not have been able to raise my family. I would not be a grandmother right now of 8. I don't even know if I would have been alive because I had such severe attacks. I lost all vision in my left eye, not a little bit, all vision in my left eye within a few days. I was flatlined on the couch. I had terrible fatigue. I had headaches like crazy. I couldn't sleep. And by the grace of God, I learned early on that MS is an infectious disease. It's been over 35 years now that I have been living MS-free. I've been studying and studying and studying, and we've really come up with what the research shows, what our students are passing, because I've had the amazing privilege now for over 20 years to support students in their recovery from parasitic infestations that cause MS and other diseases. And we're coming up to 10 years where we've been doing it in more of a formal group, our Live Disease-Free plan. And we're going to be celebrating big time next year because it's like 10 years. And we're going to be moving in different directions of supporting doctors, building up coaches. We have to get this message out. So what I'm sharing with you today is one of the infections that's really common, one of the parasites that's really common in multiple sclerosis. It's not the only one. And if you only treat Lyme, if you go to a Lyme-related doctor and you take antibiotics, you'll be very disappointed. We have to treat the big worms, the small worms, the bacteria like Borrelia, but also other bacteria, Clostridia. When we're really sick, we can have Clostridia. We can have different types of bacteria. And also, remember, Babesia travels with the Lyme infections, the co-infections. That's a protozoa. And Candida, which was the first one, and mold. So it's kind of like our microbiome is really weedy. It's really full of pests when we have chronic diseases like MS or other. And we have to knock back from big to small, and that is how we recover. So I've had students that come to me, they don't even have MS, but they had Lyme disease, and they've been working with Lyme-related doctors, and they're on antibiotics for months and months and months, and they're still sick and getting worse, having more symptoms, disability. They pass huge worms. People that have Lyme disease very often, in my experience always, they pass, it can be 2-foot worms, 2.5-foot worms, infested. So Lyme disease is not just Borrelia or Babesia or Bartonella. It's dysbiosis. That's why we're showing the symptoms of Lyme disease. That is why we have problems of these spirochete bacteria, is because the garden inside, our microbiome is so out of balance. Our immune system is not dealing with when we get these little worms, it's just like, sorry, I'm just overwhelmed. I can't handle it. And so in order to recover from this Borrelia spirochete, what we have found is following our system. You can watch my masterclass training. It goes into great detail. And if you need support, you can work with us. But first is we stop feeding the infections. They love carbohydrates and simple sugar. So we can't starve them to death, but we decrease the food to them. This really improves our symptoms tremendously. Then the next thing we do is we support the body. We're having daily bowel movements. We're sleeping well at night. So before we start treating, we're feeling a lot better. Then we start to treat from big to small. So the bacteria that are the spirochete bacteria, they are small. Same thing with babesia, same thing with fungus. They're smaller than these large worms. So yes, the filarial worms are tiny, but our students are passing really large roundworms, tapeworms, flukes, like big. Like I have more than hundreds, probably 1,000 pictures by now at least of worms that our students are passing. And they're not just passing 1 or 2 worms, they're passing hundreds of worms. I'll tell you a little story today, which kind of is going to make me... So I love horses and I'm getting back into horses, and I have a little colt. He's 4 months old. He's healthy. He's full of energy. He's not skinny. He's just built muscular. But you have to deworm your animals, right? So I dewormed him. 1 small dose of ivermectin, and I swear, and I had to mix it in with applesauce because I didn't know how else to get it in him, and he ate it really well. I'm like, gee, I hope he got it all. But he has passed at least 30 roundworms. And he looked healthy, and he looked strong, and he's muscular. And I don't even think we got all of them. We're definitely going to deworm them again. But so when we're really sick, like, think of it that way, is that our body is amazingly designed, I believe, by God. It like a lot of times we wonder, like, how can we still be alive if we have hundreds of worms? I don't know. That's why our body is so amazing. But when we are really sick, it is not just Borrelia. And we need to treat from big to small. So we, again, use the parasite drugs, we use oxygen therapies, we use herbs, and we're treating the worms and protozoa. Then we're knocking back fungus, and then we are treating these Lyme infections, right? Because if you still have the worms that are bringing Borrelia into your central nervous system, you're going to get reinfected with Borrelia, right? And if you still have a ton of big worms in your gut, they're going to weaken your immune system, and you're not going to be able to, if you get bit by a mosquito or a tick, your immune system is not going to clear the Borrelia. So it's really important to do an order from big to small over multiple cycles. And we have found that I'm not against antibiotics. I just know that one of the big reasons why I became sick was I was on too many antibiotics in the past. So they do save your life. They are important in a crisis intervention, but I don't believe that our healthcare professionals really understood how the antibiotics have devastated our microbiome. And there hasn't been enough attention into replenishing our health-promoting microbes. So a lot of us, we were like sitting ducks for whatever parasites were in our environment. And so it's really important that when we're treating, like what we have found with treating Borrelia and babesia, that the herbs can be really helpful, but it's only when you are doing all the other work. Then if you treat the big parasites, then you can actually start to recover from the small ones, the Borrelia, the babesia, the Bartonella, and other bacteria. Again, we really like liposomal herbs and herbs mixtures. They are quite amazingly helpful. Some of them will cross the blood-brain barrier, especially if you make it liposomal. Not all of it will, but a percentage will. And maybe antibiotic use will get better in time where we can treat these chronic infections. But if you just start with treating Borrelia, you will be very disappointed. If you have Lyme disease, if you have multiple sclerosis, if you have another neurological disease and you really suspect these Lyme infections, if you focus on Lyme, you're never going to get well, because there's an underlying dysbiosis, there's an underlying weedy garden with lots of pests especially in your gut, which is almost 30 feet long. It's almost the size of a double tennis court, the surface area of a double tennis court. You can imagine you can fit a lot of parasites in that area. So again, it's recovery. The protocol for recovery is really understanding that I have symptoms of Lyme disease. I have maybe been bitten by a tick, and I've maybe had a bullseye rash in the past, and I've had the Lyme testing done, and it showed the antibody bands that I have Lyme disease. If you just strictly focus on treating the Lyme disease with antibiotics, I have not seen that it works very well. And I've worked with thousands of people. If you actually understand, look at more like you've got a weedy garden and you need to knock back the big worms that actually can cause a lot of neurological symptoms also that maybe we mistake for Lyme, but really treating big to small, definitely treating Borrelia. But then once it's chronic Borrelia, chronic Lyme, then the herbs can be really helpful. Or maybe then your practitioner is going to help you with antibiotics, and then it will be working better. But again, the antibiotics, there's lots of issues with them. They're not really super helpful. Maybe in time we'll find better ways, but don't just focus on Borrelia. You will not have the quality of life that you want. I'm going to go to your questions for a minute here, if I can find my cursor. There it is. So, hi Anna, hi Donna. Antibiotics don't help with Lyme for very long. That's true. The antiparasitic wiped out my Lyme arthritis. And that's the thing, was it Lyme arthritis, or was it the worms? Because the worms can cause a lot of neurological symptoms too. But we don't want Borrelia in the central nervous system, right? We definitely don't want Borrelia in the central nervous system. So Donna, I'm convinced my Lyme condition that you had for over a decade was Babesia. And yeah, Babesia is a very big part of multiple sclerosis. I will be talking about that next week. It's at least as significant as Borrelia. So Lyme disease is technically a bunch of co-infections that travel together. So Borrelia, Babesia, Bartonella, Ehrlichia, Rickettsia, there's many different types of microbes that travel together, and we get them through biting insects. And so Babesia is another really big one in multiple sclerosis. So this is where we can kind of look at our symptoms and our health history, and we can kind of go, yeah, I've had a lot of symptoms of Borrelia, or no, I've had a lot more symptoms of Babesia. But the Borrelia is so commonly linked with MS that the MS Society felt they had to make a page to make sure people didn't get them confused, when their research actually said that, yeah, it actually could be Lyme disease. Thank you so much for your kind words. Nick, the problem is Lyme disease comes with several co-infections. Absolutely. That's just what I said, Nick. Absolutely. And so that's why, and again, it's not just those co-infections. It's all of the worms that we have. And so Dr. Alan McDonald looked at those filarial worms, and he only looked for Borrelia because that's his specialty, right? So he used a dye that is a fluorescent dye, and that fluorescent dye, it is attracted to the DNA, the genetic material of Borrelia. That's why those little worms light up like a Christmas tree, like it's green. And so that's how he knew that those worms were loaded with Borrelia. He didn't look for other microbes. That's not to say that they don't have other microbes. They could have other co-infections. They could have other, of course, they're going to be small. But even I'm sure that I've even seen that ticks can carry the larva of these filarial worms. So it's like a very complicated, and it's not really complicated. There's really like 4 different groups of parasites. There's worms, there's protozoa, there's bacteria, and there's fungi. Those are kind of like the main groups of identified parasites. And so we just have to know that, some are big and small of any of them. I mean, the worms more so. The protozoa are generally more smaller, and also the bacteria. But if we just focus even on one thing, like even the worms, getting them out, and not dealing with Babesia or not dealing with Borrelia, then we're not, because they will continue to suppress the immune system. If we've had MS for a long time, then we have chronic Babesia, Borrelia in the central nervous system, and maybe in different parts of our body. It's immunosuppressive. The worms are immunosuppressive. So they're all suppressing the immune system and making us more and more disabled because we're literally slowly dying because our immune system can't defend us anymore like it should from these infections. So yes, we treat all of it. We knock back, and fungus too. Fungus can produce mycotoxins that are deadly. They're really toxic to our nerves. So we have to knock back all the weeds in the garden. We have to knock back big and small parasites. We have to knock back different protozoa. Like some of us might have Giardia, which is a protist. Some of us might have a malaria or Babesia type protozoa. And there are many others. Toxoplasmosis I've talked about. So we have to knock back those protozoa. We also have to knock back the bacteria, like the parasites, like the ones that cause Lyme disease as far as Borrelia. And I've talked about Clostridia. It's a nasty bacteria. Some of us have a lot of E. coli from all of the bladder issues. So we've got multiple different bacteria that we need to knock back. And we need to knock back fungus because fungus loves to live in an environment where there's a lot of waste material, where it's the recycler of the world, and where the immune system is weaker, fungus thrives. So we used to think when I first was diagnosed, fungus was it. Candida caused all disease. That's what the doctors really felt because they had no idea of the Lyme infections. They had no idea of the protozoa, the bacterial, and the worms. I would say the biggest gap in understanding in even integrative health is they just do not appreciate the infestation of worms in their patients because they can't see them. They don't have good tests. And just like with my horse, I never, I thought, you have to deworm. And I remember when I was growing up, we had puppies. And I remember my dad dewormed the puppies and they had worms. So I was, of course, expecting worms, and the puppies have a lot of worms very often. So I was expecting a few. So like the first night, I dewormed them one night, and the next day my husband's like, oh, here's 3 or 4. But then I cleaned up the stool, and it's like there's 6 to 8 in 5 piles of poop. So this poor little horse had, and these worms can lay 200,000 eggs in a day. So these worms they're probably 6 inches, 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 inches, those disgusting big Ascaris roundworms. But that's just like in us, we might have gut issues, but we have no idea what's living inside of us until we start to treat and they start to come out. And our students are like, I've counted 200 worms and I'm still counting. It can go on for months and months and months. And we are doing things in a safe way. We are doing things in a way where people tolerate it, where they're getting better. So the thing is, they're getting better and better, not just by treating Borrelia. Yes, treating Borrelia or Babesia or Bartonella or Ehrlichia, whichever ones you're dealing with, but also the others, the fungus, right? And also the worms, etc. So Borrelia in the brains of Alzheimer's. So maybe you missed that, Priya, but if you go to my masterclass training, you could just kind of fast forward it. I actually show a slide on, because I think you've watched it before. I think you're one of my students. So you can actually see the images. I took shots of it and gave him credit for it. And you can see, again, it's lit up green, right? Like it's the DNA of Borrelia. And it's like a squiggly spirochete in the myelin of the nerve cell of an Alzheimer's patient. So this definitely really does not, and I'll give them the benefit of the doubt, maybe they move this information, but you try to find it and it's not there anymore. And I've tried to search for it and I can't find it. So, but it just makes you wonder, why would you take that off your website? If it's that significant, why would you take that off? And why are you not funding for the MS Society? Why are you not funding studies on Borrelia, studies on these filarial worms? Why are you not putting the money that all these people are doing they're like, one of my students, she recovered from MS and she did the bike tour. It's in Alberta, and she biked through like really cold weather. They're raising all this money to find a cure. We're not even talking about a cure anymore. We're talking about managing. We're talking about better ways to manage multiple sclerosis. Like, we need to hold them accountable. We need to say, okay, if you're not going to fund things that will look for a cure, then we should not be putting our money there. We should be putting our money into studies. So the University of Calgary, they've been working and looking. So they actually did a study. I'll be bringing that up next week about the Babesia or malaria protozoa type, how that has been really helpful. Giving it a certain treatment really helped primary progressive. They gave them a malaria drug, and they found with primary progressive multiple sclerosis that it made a significant difference. So again, like, these drugs are not perfect, and we're dealing with, heavy infections in the central nervous system deep in our tissue, but nothing works for primary progressive multiple sclerosis. So if you find a drug that actually makes a significant improvement in decreasing the progression to disability with primary progressive multiple sclerosis, should we not study that more? So the University of Calgary should receive funding, whereas where they're just looking for immunosuppressive disease-modifying drugs that we take for the rest of our life, maybe we should just cut that funding off, right? I think that would be a really wise decision. So John, can a head injury cause multiple sclerosis? No, it can't. So it's a progressive thing, but if you have a lot of parasites in your body, and we know that the central nervous system is not a sterile environment. So let's say you had some parasites moving and you're in the early stages of a parasitic infestation, and you did have a head injury. That trauma to your body and to your head, it is taxing to your immune system. It can trigger the MS that would have happened maybe in a year or two. So yes, and again, MS is just meaning that you have such a significant infestation that your immune system can no longer deal with the parasites. And it's kind of giving up. The parasites it's like an out of control war is what it is. Inflammation is when your immune system is attacking an enemy. Inflammation is when the immune system attacks an enemy. Inflammation is present in every chronic disease. Inflammation is present in I'm telling you common sense things that are well understood in science. So inflammation is in every disease. Inflammation is your immune system is attacking an enemy. The primary job of your immune system is to fight infection. That is its primary job. So why are we not looking for parasites in the central nervous system, parasites in the blood, parasites in the intestines of MS? Why are we not looking for that? Because the group that have come up with the 2017 McDonald criteria, they find no value in looking for parasites. They've said that in that criteria. They find no value in looking for parasites causing MS. That's the reason. They just don't want to. They don't think it's... And then you go to the very last 2 pages of and so this criteria is how we diagnose and treat MS in all the developed countries. This is the blueprint of how we're supposed to do it. And guess who funds that? Look on the last 2 pages, and it is all the drug companies that are selling the disease-modifying drugs. They are influencing how we diagnose and how we treat multiple sclerosis. Because you're probably wondering, like, why are we not looking for Borrelia? That's why. They don't feel that it's valuable. They don't want to. Are they looking out for our best interest? That is a really good question. I don't know. It doesn't look like it. So MS is caused by you not being able to overcome infections. Everyone has had a tick or mosquito bite. Like everyone's had a mosquito bite, right? And many of the mosquitoes are infected with Borrelia and other it's like a lot of the biting insects, they pass different infections on, even spider bites and ticks and mosquitoes. But people that their garden is more in balance, they might get a little bit of Borrelia from a mosquito bite, and their immune system fights it off. But when you're like this camel with an overloaded back, then it's really hard for your immune system to fight anything. Like it becomes a place where the immune system is like, there's hundreds of worms in here, there's bacteria, fungi, and mold, and there's also protozoa. I can't do it anymore. And so we need to support our immune system. And that's what the Live Disease-Free Plan does. Is the Live Disease-Free Plan is like supporting the body, feeling better before we even start treating. I hear every day that our Live Disease-Free diet has been a game changer for people, whether they have MS or other diseases, when they're following it properly. When you decrease the energy to the parasites, they're going to be more quiet and you're going to start feeling better. Those guidelines are free on our website, livediseasefree.com, under research. Start changing your diet. It'll start changing your life. But you still have to treat in order to get your health and your life back. A couple more questions and I will let you go. Please keep typing your questions. We will answer your questions. We've got an amazing team. All right, so people with MS took too many antibiotics. And yeah, not just MS, but people that have Crohn's disease, inflammatory bowel, different autoimmune. So it really destroys our microbiome. And again, there is a time and place for antibiotics, right? It saves people's lives. If they have pneumonia, it can save your life. But it's just that when I was young, like they were scaring my parents. It's like, if your kids get a strep infection, it will affect their heart, and then they'll have a bad heart for the rest of their life. So every time we would have a high fever, we would go to our doctor, and the doctor would write a prescription for antibiotics. And this was many, many years ago, like Little House on the Prairie. And we were on antibiotics a lot. And then I was on antibiotics for acne, tetracycline for acne for months. So that was, I'm sure, and I grew up on a farm, so I was in the dirt all the time. We had all kinds of animals. We had pigs, bunnies, all kinds of animals, cows, horses. So when you're around a lot of parasites and you've lost your natural defense, you are a sitting duck. You are more susceptible. And yes, I had stomach aches and I had constipation for years before multiple sclerosis. And they're not making this link. And I've shared so much evidence. It's like nauseating how much evidence I've shared. So you just have to make the decision. Do you want to continue down this path of living with this disease, living with progression, losing your life, losing your mobility? Or is like, this is enough. I'm going to research this. And if it makes sense to me, which it probably makes common sense to you, then take a different path like I did. It will save your life. It will give you back your life. You can have more recovery than you ever thought possible. So one person here said that she has treated with a certain parasite drug. She tested repeatedly for Lyme, always negative. Tested for parasites, negative. Of course, none of the parasite tests work. And so she became very ill using that parasite drug for a month. Let's just see if it helped. She got really sick, right? So I would not recommend just dosing or self-medicating. That's very dangerous to do. The problem is like ivermectin doesn't treat Lyme disease. Ivermectin doesn't even treat all the worms. You need to have an individualized plan for whatever parasites are in you. There are certain parasite drugs and herbs that will treat roundworms. Different ones will treat tapeworms. Different ones will treat the flukes. And then also there will be different herbs that will be more helpful for Borrelia, different ones for Babesia or malaria. I always say the two because we don't know because they're not testing which one, but it's a protozoa that infects our red blood cells, right? So we do use herbs we use oxygen therapies, and we use a specialized tailored plan to what you're dealing with. You have to use effective doses, and you have to make sure you don't overdose. Like, you don't know what you're doing. Please do not. And I know a lot of people, I was talking to one person today, he was thinking about doing ivermectin and fenbendazole. That's going all over the internet. And lots of people are trying it, and you will not recover. You will not recover. It was very wonderful that one man that took fenbendazole that had a terminal cancer, and it's kept him alive for years. That's one specific type of microbe that's causing it. Fenbendazole is okay, but it's quite a weak parasite drug, and most of our students don't even use it, right? And even with our horses, it's just not a preferred treatment. So it's really important that we get the help that we need, that we're guided through this process. And honestly, what our students are doing is they're learning this skill themselves so that they learn how to be the director of their health, so that they can prevent ending up in this position again. They know how to read their blood work. They understand what symptoms mean early on. So once you recover, you will treat parasites periodically. At least if you've had chronic disease, I would treat at least twice a year, maybe 3 times a year. Because again, we're going to decrease their presence in our body so much that we feel symptom-free, but we still could have eggs inside of us. We could still have larvae that start to hatch, right? And then one worm starts to produce 200,000 eggs in a day, just like my little colt. Like, it's absolutely, I'm sure he's not done, but it was quite eye-opening. And I knew he would do that, but you just can't believe it until they come out, and you're just like, oh, that is just disgusting. So Priya, you're curious about MS, hug, and rib cage pain. It's not necessarily in Lyme. It could be. We don't even try to guess. We just look at, okay, your symptoms, and we look at what you're passing. So our students, whatever they're passing with the enemas, because sometimes, like I said, we can have Lyme literate doctors working with Lyme patients that don't even have MS. They come to our program because they can't get better on antibiotics, and they're passing huge worms, and they feel so much better than they ever did treating Lyme. So we can have Borrelia in the central nervous system. We shouldn't. But is that what's causing your biggest symptoms? You don't know until you start treating all of it. So what do you think about ivermectin and turkey tail? Again, ivermectin is helpful for some things, but it is not the primary helpful. Ivermectin is really helpful for some things. So there are integrative doctors that are using higher doses for certain cancers, but then albendazole will also be helpful for other cancers. And then fenbendazole can be helpful for different cancers. So ivermectin is just one of probably close to 10. So for example, if people have roundworms, they're not just going to take one roundworm medication. They're not that good. They will take 2 or 3 at least together, plus herbs, plus the oxygen therapies, doing those enemas, flushing them out. It's challenging treating these worms, honestly. Hi, Cindy. Hi, Priya. You've given up on cures. A patient cured is a customer. Sorry, they've given up on cures. A patient cured is a customer lost. But what bothers me more is that we're okay with that. Like, we're not outraged. We're not like, what happened? Like, we want a cure. We don't want to live on these disease-modifying drugs. We don't want to continually become disabled and lose our life and die prematurely. Why? Like, what have they done to us, honestly? Like, with all the things that are going on I'm not even going to get into politics, but like with what's going on in the world, that maybe it's because we're just like rats on a treadmill and we're all working so hard and we're just trying to get by, that we just don't always pay attention and we're too tired. I don't know what it is, but we should be outraged that we're not looking for a cure, that we're looking for new treatments to manage chronic disease. Like, we need to just get outraged about that. Karen, thank you. All right, I'm going to let you guys go. We've been on long enough, but thank you so much for all of your amazing questions. So infrared, definitely, like there's so many things that can support our health. They won't get the parasites out. They won't get the Borrelia out. They won't get Babesia, Borrelia, the worms. It helps to maybe release some toxins that they're producing, but you want to get rid of what's causing the toxins. The biggest cause of toxins in your body, yeah, there's environmental toxins we have to deal with, but the biggest cause of toxins in your body are coming from all of these parasites, right? So keep that in mind. So I'm going to let you guys go. I hope you guys have a wonderful week. I'll be back next week. I'll be talking about the link between multiple sclerosis and this protozoa. It's really huge. It's as huge as the Lyme. And it is a really big part of people that have not just MS, but other chronic diseases that have similar symptoms to multiple sclerosis. And if you enjoy these talks, it's a lot of work, it's a lot of research on my part. If you want us to help change this world, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe. If you do that, it's going to get in front of more eyeballs. Maybe we can get some people, talking more about it and really demanding change. We want change. That's the big thing. And if you're at that place where like, Pam, I've been following you for a while. Thank you so much for everything, but I need to treat. I can't stand one more day having these parasites in my body. Watch my masterclass training. And if you would like to work with us, we have an amazing proven plan. That's how the wellness champions have been recovering from parasitic infestations that cause MS and other diseases. Be honored to support you. So just watch that. You'll learn all the steps that we take. So, and if you want our support, then make sure to fill out the form, book a time to chat with me, and make sure it's a good fit for you. So otherwise, have a wonderful week. We will talk to you next week. Take care and bye-bye for now.